So, Armen, you've been speaking to Ralph about role-playing games, tabletop games, and conversation's starting to wind down now. How are you going to segue this into your topic?
What if I told you that you can build your own real-world RPG, your own statistics like getting better strength or stamina or endurance or flexibility or coordination, and level up not just in the game, but also in the real world, and level up in the physical world, and you yourself are the character that you're leveling up. That is what CrossFit and fitness is all about.
I love it. Brilliant. Okay, on with the show.
Well, he's got a new guest, time to put him to the test. So hey, what's the topic? We don't know, cause he never does research for this show. His name is Jason, he wants to talk to you about a topic you love or something you do. No two topics are ever the same. That might sound impressive, but they're all pretty lame. A conversation with
Hello, you're listening to A Conversation With. My name is Jason, and each week I'm joined by a guest, and we have a conversation on a topic of their choice. And this week I'm being joined by Armen Hammer from Armen Hammer TV on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, basically everywhere on the internet. Just type that in and you'll find him. And as you've heard, we're going to be speaking about CrossFit. So hi, Armen.
Hi, it's good to be here, Jason. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. I appreciate we were able to work out time zones and everything, which is wonderful. You look ridiculously fresh for somebody who, what time? It's not that early there, but was it like 8 o'clock where you are?
Yeah, it's right around 8 a.m. I've been awake for about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. I have a very slow process in the mornings of waking up. It's a very like, I'm going to say measured, but really it's probably better described as lazy. But yeah, I have a very slow process, but I like to wake up early and just get stuff done around the house and have a bunch of coffee. So
we'll go with measured. I think that's the the more flattering term. So we're going to be talking about CrossFit. Finally, it's a topic I know something about, because the last couple, I'll be honest, I've been struggling. But finally, it's something I'm aware of, but maybe our listeners are not. So how would you describe what CrossFit is to you, or your, because I will just roll back 1 second, because I would say that before I actually knew what CrossFit was, I knew about CrossFit and how dangerous it was and how it would kill you if you tried to do it. So is that CrossFit? Can you maybe just give us some little info on it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people think they understand what CrossFit is, or have heard of what CrossFit is in a way that may not actually give them any real information. They hear about it as this dangerous exercise fad, and it's it's going to hurt you, or it's going to hurt your shoulders, or it's unsustainable, or whatever the negative press is at the moment. But I think at its core, CrossFit is this fitness methodology that's based off of the concept of measuring your fitness and measuring your health and moving it forward in like an efficient way, right? So in the CrossFit world, we use these terms that might sound a little more confusing than they actually are, but it's a very simple concept, which is CrossFit is basically constantly varied, high-intensity functional movements. So the idea there is like you change up your workouts all the time. You always go hard. High intensity, the idea is like you're either going as fast as you can, or you're going as many reps as you can within a certain time limit. And obviously, as fast as or as many reps as is scalable to the individual, as well as you want to keep an eye on not doing something silly or hurtful to yourself, right? Like moving well. And then the idea of functional movements that are going to actually have a big payoff physiologically. So that's like the core of CrossFit. It's just this concept of, like, how am I going to get the most bang for my buck out of the gym? And if you're able to get, a really solid workout in half an hour or 45 minutes, something that, breaks a good sweat and gets your heart rate up and gets you moving through a big range of motion, squatting or pulling or running or lunging or pushing, whatever the combination of movements is, I think that's really a positive thing. And people sometimes maybe lose sight of what that could mean. It's definitely not easy, but it's certainly not dangerous in any real sense. I mean, it's probably more dangerous to get in your car and drive to the gym than it is to actually be in the gym. Actually, I won't even say probably. It is 100% more dangerous to get in your car and drive to the gym than it is to actually be in the gym.
Yeah, if anyone has listened to the Patreon episode that I put out about cars, they'll know that I've had a number of accidents in my car. I'll be honest, not my fault, people hitting me, but as of yet, no accidents in the gym. So
I've been doing CrossFit for 10 years, and I have not injured myself once. So, I think outside of a couple little scrapes and bruises and aches that have gone away over the course of a couple weeks, if CrossFit was so dangerous, someone who's put in the amount of time and volume and training that I have would have hurt themselves already. And I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah. And I think if people are listening and they don't really know that much about CrossFit, it might sound like, I've been doing it for 10 years. Oh, 10 years doesn't sound like that long. I mean, I've got this hobby and I've been doing this for 20 years, for 30 years. But with regards to kind of how new CrossFit is, 10 years is kind of going back to almost the very beginning of CrossFit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. When I first started CrossFitting, I was still a teenager. I was in my late teens. I think I was 19. And so I basically was joining a gym. I don't know if you're familiar with California or Los Angeles. That's where I'm from. So LA is really big. It's a huge city. And there's maybe 8 or 9 million people who live, in the greater Los Angeles area. And in that entire space, there were 4 gyms and only 4 CrossFit gyms. Now there are probably 1,500, maybe more. And so, you're talking about a time in which it was very much a smaller event and a smaller community than it ever was. Like the first gym I joined was the entry was out of an alleyway, so it didn't even have a front door, and it was maybe 600 square feet. So it's smaller than most people's living rooms. It's about the size of like a small apartment. And it was just crowded constantly, and everyone was there kind of trying to figure out what this thing was. Nobody really knew even how to describe it to other people. You just kind of had to come and try it. The owner of our gym used to use this really strange analogy of it's like basketball with weights, which doesn't make any sense. But back then there was no comparison. Like nobody really understood free weights and or sort of the idea of mixing and matching all these movements together. And I guess now it's probably easier to compare it to something like, high intensity training, right? And that sort of thing exists now in most commercial gyms. And I think a lot of that is due to how popular CrossFit has become. But back then it was very, very much kind of like this unheard of, unknown, weird thing that people would do. And, it built a really interesting vibe very quickly.
So what was it then that, considering if there was only sort of 4 gyms and, so many people, yet obviously very few were finding this. So how is it that you kind of came across CrossFit or what drew you to it in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started CrossFitting because I was out of shape, but mostly because I was bored. So I was at university, and my older brother he'd gotten married and put on a bunch of weight and wanted to lose weight and kind of get back into shape. He was an athlete all through high school and college. And so he had started doing CrossFit. He joined this gym. And he went for a few months, and he really enjoyed it. And he was like, hey, man, you should give this a shot. I think you would like this too. And I wasn't really that interested. And then I saw a few videos. He showed me some videos, like really old school videos. Jason, maybe you've seen these. The Josh Everett doing King Kong video from 2008. Like that was one of the first videos I ever saw. And to me, it was like watching a superhero. I was like, this should not be possible. This guy's lifting so much weight and also doing things like handstand push-ups. Like, this doesn't make any sense. This is the type of thing that you'd read like Batman doing in his training, so it was kind of mind-blowing in that sense. And I was kind of not really being challenged at school, and I wasn't really bought into my degree. So I enjoyed studying, but it wasn't really pushing me to like spend any time. So the question was, do I spend my time like playing video games all day, or should I actually do something different? And so I picked up CrossFit as kind of like both a fitness regimen, but also like a psychological practice of like something that's going to engage me. And it immediately hooked me. Like, just the concept of, okay, you can do this faster next time, or you can get better at this thing. I played sports as a child, but I never really thought about the physiology of what I was doing. And I never really thought about getting better at doing something like, what if I thought about running more efficiently? Or what if I thought about lifting weights more efficiently? And I didn't enjoy being in the gym, but something about CrossFit and the people I was surrounded by and the types of workouts and just the idea of being able to go super hard and, kind of build that pain threshold and being uncomfortable and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Something about that combination really struck a nerve with me. And I felt like I finally found a hobby that I could do forever, basically.
Yeah, and I think as well, the points you mentioned, it's true kind of for everyone. When you go there, like, oh, I can do that faster. And you've got somebody who's doing it in 10 minutes and you're doing it in half an hour. Well, they can try and get it in 9 minutes next time, and you can try and get it in like 25. So there's always that goal. Or, I'm thinking of like the new ones that come into the classes, and it's sort of, they're trying to get their first pull-up. And then somebody else who's been there a while, they're trying to get their first muscle up. And it's that everybody's got something that they're striving for. You kind of no one is going, yeah, I think I've done it. I'm at the top now. That's it. Because there's always, I can do 10 unbroken bar muscle ups. Great. Can you do 11? There's like always another number, which it's frustrating.
I really like that.
Great.
Yeah. That's a good point, because, one of the things that really I love about the practice of CrossFit is the idea that you can set your own goals. There really, like, there's an overarching idea of like, general snapshot of your fitness. It's a combination of like, how good are you at longer events? How good are you at sprinting? How good are you at lifting heavy? How good are you at light lifting? Like that sort of thing. But you can put your focus on any one of those things at any given time. And so I always felt like it was constantly refreshing. If I got burnt out or tired of doing one type of workout, I just did other types of workouts. I just spent a little more time focusing on something else. And that was always fun, because, after 5, 6, 7 years of like really heavy training, like PRs don't really happen that often anymore. Right. So you have to be able to focus on every day, like, what is it that I'm trying to get out of this today? And so that type of freedom in being able to set my own goals and set my own circumstances is really key to me.
Yeah. I think what I really like about it as well is that like everybody's got something they're good at. And even if that's just, I'm a small guy, so anything that's body weight for me, brilliant. Pull-ups, handstand push-ups, regular push-ups, anything that's just body weight, wonderful. But of course, as soon as the weight starts getting heavy, that's when, like, for me, it's quite a challenge. So I did the Open RX, and that was a nightmare because everything was heavy, like really heavy. But anything that was body weight, I was like, oh, brilliant, I can kind of breeze through this. So if you get a workout that's got some bar work, some body weight, maybe the guy who's a big guy, very strong, he's going to smash through the barbell. But then he gets onto the bodyweight stuff. That's kind of where he starts to slow down. And you can be doing the opposite. So going slow on the bar, but you speed up on the bodyweight. So you always go home with sort of that, this went well. And this is where I need to to improve. So usually the list of where you need to improve is a lot longer than the list of of things that went well. But you didn't just practice CrossFit. I think you actually took it a step further because you started coaching and you opened a gym with your brother. Is that correct?
I did, yeah. That's right. I, like I said, I was not being very challenged by my schooling, and I wasn't very interested in following my degree to a professional level. I have a degree in psychology and philosophy, so I didn't really want to be a clinical psychologist, and the idea of being a I don't know, air quotes, philosopher was interesting to me, but I didn't really want to go to school for another 10 years to be, an assistant professor or a professor. And so I was very ready to just be done with school. And it just happened that I graduated. I had done some internships and kind of like apprenticeships and assistant coaching positions at various gyms in Southern California, gyms that luckily enough happened to be some of the best facilities in the world, with some of the best coaches in the world. And so I learned a lot, and my brother was also kind of having a similar experience with his professional life. He just didn't want to continue working in the field he was in and wanted something new and different and refreshing. And so, we kind of talked about it, and we opened a gym together in March of 2011. So I finished school in late 2010, and within a few months we had opened our doors. And I was at first just sort of helping out, and then I started coaching full time, and then by the end of it, I was managing the gym as well as coaching full time. It was a really great opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
And so I imagine during that time you saw kind of CrossFit really start to expand, take off. Well, if you were opening, you probably weren't the only one opening a gym, so there were probably a lot more opening at the same time, and that 4 probably turned into a lot more.
A lot more, yeah.
So I guess, do we talk about it now? Let's broach the subject of the games, because I think you're one of the few people that's actually been to kind of all the locations where they've held the games.
That's probably true. That's probably very true. Yeah. So the CrossFit Games, CrossFit itself started in, I guess, the modern version of CrossFit probably started in the early 2000s. That's about when Greg Glassman, who founded CrossFit, moved out of sort of like being a personal trainer in commercial gyms and into his own facility, and started publishing his workouts online, and really started putting out, 2002-ish is when he started writing those journal articles about what is fitness and, how does CrossFit fit into that paradigm. And, so it was several years after the origination of CrossFit as a methodology in 2007 when they first decided, like, hey, we should do like a little backyard barbecue, and we can invite some of our friends, and, we can all compete, and we can find out who's the best CrossFitter. And so they started the CrossFit Games at this guy's family's ranch in Northern California. His name's Dave Castro. He still is the head of the CrossFit Games to this day, and that was like 12, 13 years ago. So, I guess it pays to be in the right place at the right time and know the right people for sure.
And have a ranch.
And so, and have a family that has a nice ranch, right? And so it all paid off really well. And so the CrossFit Games started there in 2007. And the first couple of years, it really was just kind of like sign up, show up, come and hang out. We'll have a barbecue. We'll have some beers. A lot of people will do a lot of fitness, and we'll see what happens. And so it really developed this like kind of, they use the phrase Woodstock of CrossFit or Woodstock of fitness vibe, which I don't know. Listen, I'm not old enough to have been to Woodstock. The only thing I know about Woodstock is it was like this really wild music festival and was a celebration of the culture of the time. So I guess in a way it makes sense. So I think they sort of built this machine in the CrossFit Games that they didn't really know what it was going to do, and it blew up and turned into something really huge a few years later. They moved from that ranch to Southern California to I think back then it was called the Home Depot Center, which was on the campus of a university So they had a bunch of facilities all of a sudden at their fingertips. It wasn't just a ranch in the middle of nowhere. It was an actual sports facility. There was a soccer stadium. There was a tennis stadium. There was like a pool, a velodrome. There's access to, within 45-minute drive, you could be on the beach. And so they suddenly had a lot more creativity and freedom to do very, very cool things in this thing. And CrossFit at the same time was blowing up and getting all over the world. And so the games really, really grew at this astounding rate. And I think one of the things that helped it was in 2011, they started doing what they call the Open, which is just like a big online competition that they start the season with. And so it turned into this opportunity for anyone who felt like they were in good shape or wanted to test themselves or wanted to participate, they could. You could just go and do the workouts online. And so I think it was this really strange and lucky combination of a bunch of different things that turned the games into this like momentum monster, and it's rolled into what it is today, which is, it's a different beast than it was back then, but it's still a huge player in this world.
And this kind of then nicely sort of flows into another, how to describe this, sort of another avenue of CrossFit that you're involved in, because the monster that was the CrossFit Games, it looks like it's changing quite a lot over the next, from now, basically, from this last Games. Now you put out a few YouTube videos talking about the changes that were about to happen. I read some of the comments in those YouTube videos. You don't know what you're talking about, apparently.
Yeah. I'm lucky enough that, in the years and years that I've been doing CrossFit, with the fact that it was a very small community to start with, and the fact that I immediately jumped into a role of a blogger and that sort of thing right off the bat, that I've gotten to know a lot of people and have built not like a large audience, but have an audience to communicate to. And when they decided to change the format of the CrossFit Games, I was one of the first people that knew, and I was on top of helping break that information and spread that information out there. And even though that information came directly from the founder of CrossFit himself, it still wasn't good enough for people. And so people are still waiting. Some people still to this day are telling me on my videos, trying interviews with the founder of CrossFit, telling me that I'm waiting for official announcement. I'm trying to figure out what is more official than that. I'm not 100% sure what information they're hoping for or what source they're looking for. But yeah, according to some people on the internet, I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'm just spreading rumors.
I think they're just waiting for a picture from Dave Castro with like two obscure objects, and then they can interpret it how they like.
That's right.
Yeah. But that was incredible because, again, you are someone who, we said, you've had this long history with CrossFit. It hasn't always been the best relationship with CrossFit. To the point that you got kicked out of the games.
I did, yeah. So, my relationship with CrossFit as a follower of the methodology has always been positive. I feel like the methodology is sound, and if it does one thing really well, it presents like a coherent and cohesive argument for why it's a good methodology. And so I always loved the methodology. But the actual organization of CrossFit Inc. has had a lot of hiccups. They've made plenty of decisions that weren't great. And I think, that's a part of growing pains of many corporations, but it really is compounded by the fact that CrossFit wasn't founded to be this giant international corporation. It just happened to become this giant international corporation. And the same people that were helping it when it was very tiny are now the same people that are helping it as this huge industry. And so it's very rare that you find even one person that can take something from inception to like small, and then small to medium to large, much less a whole team of people. And that's generally what happened. They they kind of all were able to like harness this like wild energy and turn it into this big international corporation. But along the way, because they weren't maybe really well prepared for this, they made some really poor decisions. And me being a loudmouth, I was very vocally critical about some of those poor decisions. And back then in the early 2010s, like 2011, 2012, there really wasn't a lot of threats to CrossFit, right? CrossFit was just kind of, they were doing their own thing, and, the health and fitness community wasn't a fan of what they were doing, but they weren't threatening CrossFit in any sort of existential way. And so when someone like me jumps out there and starts being, really loud and really angry and really critical about how they're making decisions and what they're doing, the ego involved there, they took it very personally. And because of that, I was removed from the CrossFit Games in 2012. I was there hanging out. I have a podcast and we were recording, and we had just finished up, and the head of the CrossFit Games himself, the general manager, not Dave Castro, the general manager of the CrossFit Games, found me. I'd never met him and didn't know who he was. He found me and he removed me personally from the CrossFit Games. Now, luckily now my relationship is much more positive. It's like I actually have a working relationship with them, but it's a big, I think it was eye-opening for them, because soon after that happened is when CrossFit as a corporation really faced its first threat to its existence, which was the potential of like an outside investor coming in and purchasing a large portion of its ownership, and with the plan of sort of turning it into the equivalent of a Gold's Gym or 24-Hour Fitness, where they franchise it out and they require all the franchises to like sell the same supplements and take a cut of all the t-shirt sales and all this different stuff that really goes philosophically against the mindset of what CrossFit's supposed to be about, this like open platform for people to express their fitness. And that, I think, was eye-opening for them, because they realized that, hey, like one guy who really just loves what we do but is critical about how we do certain things, that guy's not the problem. And I think that was a moment for them to really understand, like, I'm not a threat, right? I'm just someone who really enjoys what we're doing and thinks that we could do it in a better way.
Yeah, and I think, like with all fan bases, you have that, right? I mean, a movie might come out. I mean, you think of, like, you've obviously got the toxic fan base that we see quite often these days, but you think of something like Star Wars. Star Wars movie will come out, and people that can still love a movie, but then say, I love it, but I wish this had been different, or I wish that had been different. And it's not because they hate that thing or they don't want to see it anymore. It's just because they love it so much, they kind of have these feelings about, like, oh, I just wish, I feel it could be better. It's good, but it could be even better. And, with CrossFit, it's the same. You're like going, I love what they're doing, but I'd love it even more if they did X,
right.
Y, or Z.
Exactly.
But I think it's probably now even been beneficial for you, the fact that you love CrossFit in all its forms, let's say the official and what was maybe once considered the kind of unofficial CrossFit, because you've got all the different sort of competitions, like the Granite Games, Waterpalooza, things like that. And because you were just, you weren't saying, well, I only care about if it's got the official kind of stamp from CrossFit. You were still, going to these things, getting involved in these things. So now you've kind of got relationships in place with people there that's probably very beneficial now that they've all become kind of sanctioned events and are really important to know these people. And you're not now kind of knocking at the door going, hi, I'd like to know you. You're sort of already there.
Yeah, I guess I've been very lucky in my career in that without really planning for any of this, I've set myself up for success, which, I'm very, very lucky. I'm very fortunate. And I can kind of see where that's coming from, with being able to like say that, I started CrossFitting when it was very, very small. And so I got to know all of these people because the community was very small. You could just walk up to somebody and talk to them, and now where there's millions and millions of CrossFitters, I have personal connections and relationships and business relationships with pretty much every major player in the game. And, with the ability to sort of over the past 10 years go from writing blogs and doing short videos and having a podcast and meeting all these people through the podcast to covering the sport itself professionally and, helping with the broadcasting and helping with the actual storytelling and meeting all the athletes and meeting all the coaches and meeting the event organizers to now where I think the role that I play as sort of an outside analyst or like a pundit, I guess, or someone who I'm hesitant to use the word journalist because I don't identify myself as a journalist. I don't see necessarily what I do as journalism. I think that's a much more important and meaningful term than what I do. But I basically am this commentator, this outside, media personality and expert in this field. And now more than ever, CrossFit as both a methodology and as a sport needs people like me to cover it. And so I am just very lucky. My timing has always been on point, and happily I've been ready to sort of take advantage of those circumstances when it comes up. And I find myself at a very interesting crossroads now where I'm trying to cover this thing as best as I can and build this channel and see what happens.
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned the channel. It's that I think the thing you've really got going for you there is also the videos you're putting out. They're pretty short. I mean, you also put out quite long ones on certain topics, or I think you upload the podcast there as well, so people can go there and stay for a few hours. But generally, in 4 minutes, you're like, hey, this is what's happened. This is what it means. This is what could happen, or it could be this. Let's wait and see. And kind of in just a few minutes, you're like, all right, I'm up to date on what's going on. And a lot of the predictions that people were very because there was things that you knew, just kind of well, this is I've been told this, and people were going, that can't be true. And then there were things you're going, well, if this thing that I have been told and is true happens, maybe they'll do this. I think the super teams. That's something like you mentioned, kind of. So in the past, you had to work out of the same gym in order to be on a team. I don't want to talk too much about teams because hopefully Chase is going to come on and he's going to tell us everything we need to know about being on a team. So
yeah, Chase will be able to give you a much more in-depth perspective on what it's like being in that arena because he was able to, train and work hard and find a good team and make it and earn his way onto regional floor with his team. And they weren't that far out from qualifying for the games either. So yeah, he's a good person to talk to about that.
And how long's he been doing CrossFit?
I think he's only been doing CrossFit for 3 or 4 years. So, if 4 years, I would be shocked. I would say he's probably only really been doing CrossFit for 3 years.
So I'm just going to do a bit of maths, Armen. So he's been doing it for 3 years. He's gone to regionals on a team. Now, someone else who's gone to regionals on a team is your wife.
That's right. My wife, she hates it when I bring it up for some reason because I think she has a bit of imposter syndrome. She has this idea of oh, it wasn't real. But she made it onto a team at regionals within 3 months of starting CrossFit. And it's been it sounds kind of crazy, but that's about as good of a CrossFitter as exists in the world, right? And she isn't really doing CrossFit anymore these days, at least not to the level that she was back then. But I tried to make CrossFit regionals for years. I mean, I dedicated the prime of my physical life, my late teens and early to mid 20s, was entirely dedicated to making regionals. And I never once made it to regionals. And Chase made it to regionals his second year or third year of CrossFit, maybe even his second CrossFit Games season. He was in the regionals on a team. And my wife, right when we met, 3 or 4 months after we met, and she'd been CrossFitting for just that period of time, she made it to regionals on a team. And those are really impressive performances. It just goes to show you that someone like me who grew up playing baseball, which is not the most athletic sport in the world, and doing distance running and, running marathons, that sort of thing, like not really the most athletic thing in the world, I stand no chance to people who are actual athletes. Like Chase was a sprinter, a wrestler, he played football, he played real sports growing up. My wife was a swimmer and a gymnast and was really good at both of those things and also played soccer. So it's just, it goes to show you that, the athletic base that you build as a child, it goes a really long way. Like reading until 3 o'clock in the morning or playing video games all day doesn't really help you if you're trying to be really good at fitness later on.
Yeah. So my son's 5, so I better get him. I'll get him a barbell quickly now, and get him
like one of those toy barbells.
There was one morning I just looked out my window. He's in the garden. He's got the poles you'd use for like growing beans or something like that. He's picked up one of them. He's front squatting in the garden. So
that's awesome.
Hey, there we go. That's future regional athlete. Only the regionals are gone.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it's very much a monkey see, monkey do situation with children. My wife and I don't have any children ourselves, but we have plenty of nieces and nephews on both sides, and it really is. It's fascinating to watch them mimic their parents and mimic us as their aunts and uncles, and it's very, very cool. Like we're both excited to have kids one day, and maybe one day we'll have our own little tot running around.
Yeah. So, I don't think I've mentioned it on the podcast yet, but my wife is now expecting our second child. So that's
congratulations.
We haven't mentioned it because as of recording this, we haven't yet gone for the kind of the first proper scan. So it's still kind of early days. So we've been keeping it quiet. But that will be before this goes out. So it's interesting because we called one of the coaches at the box who, when we first joined, she was pregnant at the time, and sort of we saw her go through the pregnancy and still continue doing it and kind of have the baby and then like a little break and go back in and start training again. Mm-hmm. So I sort of arranged for them to meet up to have a chat just to know, like, what can I do, how, because she was a bit concerned because it had been sort of the school holiday time before. We'd obviously not gone as much because my son was always at home, so it made it more difficult. So it was already like, oh man, going back after only going maybe once or twice in a week, it's going to be difficult. And now you're pregnant as well.
Yeah, there's talk about speed bumps to just make it even more challenging to get back into the groove of things.
Yeah, but it's good if you can keep moving. By the sounds of things, there's been a couple that have gone through pregnancies and continued going to the gym, to the box, whatever you want to call it. And I really don't like the term box, I'll be honest with you.
It's not the most endearing term for a place, right? Like you don't really ever happily speak about being in a box. It just doesn't it doesn't make any sense. It's just such a strange. It's one of those things that started, 15 years ago when CrossFit gyms were quite literally boxes. I mean, it's like a warehouse. Some of them didn't even have real walls. It was just insulation and framing. And, it really was just a big open empty space. And I think that's supposed to be the what you're supposed to take from calling it a box. But it's really just a very strange word that has stuck around for so long.
It just seems like you're inviting people to criticize you.
That's right. The last thing you need is more of a reason for someone who's not in on the club to like make fun of you or want to like just not associate with you. So, maybe we need to find a better way of describing these things.
Okay, next time Greg phones you, you can just float float that idea out. See if the relationship stays strong after that.
That's right.
So, Armen, normally at this point, or I always say, or like 20 minutes ago, it's usually this point, I'll be honest with you. I usually hand over to my guest and let them ask me questions about their topic, that is CrossFit. So I've already revealed a lot of my secrets, but any questions for me about your topic?
Yeah, I'm curious, how long have you been CrossFitting for? Because you seem pretty knowledgeable about the history of the sport. So I'm curious how long you've been doing this for.
Not that long, to be honest with you. I kind of like to know what I'm doing. So, and I listen to an insane amount of podcasts, which helps. I've been doing it for about a year and a half. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you and I have similar methods in this sort of thing. That if you find something that kind of bites you and really takes hold of you, you're going to go all in and figure it out as quickly as you can. Because I did the exact same thing. When I first started CrossFit, I was like, okay, well, I'll just read and listen and watch everything I possibly can about this thing and come up to speed.
Yeah.
So for someone who's only been doing it for a year and a half, you have a pretty deep knowledge of what's going on.
Oh, well, that's quite a compliment. Thank you very much. Well, I think as well, I don't know if things are different here in the UK compared to like America, I haven't actually gone to any other CrossFit boxes apart from the one here in Bath. But I mean, the coaching is really spot on. So we have Alec Harwood and Laura Faulkner that both went to the last regionals in Germany. And, the different coaches kind of are almost specialists in different things. Ollie also runs like an Olympic lifting class on Wednesday evening. So I started doing that because I didn't for a long time. For like the almost first year, I felt I can't go to that. Like I'm not good enough, which is completely the wrong idea because it should be you go to that to get good. But again, because I'm like naturally a smaller person, having better technique helps me to get better lifts. Whereas somebody who's maybe just naturally a bigger guy, he doesn't need the best technique just to muscle it up overhead anyway, sort of thing. So I'm like, any advantage I can get, let me take it. But yeah, so just about a year and a half, maybe a bit more.
You'd be surprised how common that mindset is. I remember when I first started CrossFitting, watching really good CrossFitters, like strong CrossFitters, and thinking to myself that there's no way I'll ever be that strong. That there's just something different about them and me. Like I'm built differently, or I have different parts, or whatever it is. Like I just am different, and because of that, I'll never be that strong. And it was only after I got rid of that mindset was when I started actually realizing that I could be that strong. I could train myself into that type of capacity. And I kind of wish that I had gotten rid of that mindset a lot earlier. But the fact that it took you only a year to get into that is good, because it took me much longer than that before I really started jumping in and trying really hard at this thing. So that's a quick pace. What was it that brought you to CrossFit to begin with?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I have been someone who kind of on and off went to gyms for years. I lived abroad for 10 years. That made it quite difficult because it's not easy. Actually, I wish I'd been doing CrossFit then, because I think it's much easier to go into a CrossFit box in another country and be like, I kind of get what's going on, But when you're just going to a gym and people come up and start speaking to you, and I'm like, look, I'm not a master of your language. I don't really want to talk about, it's hard enough for me to order a pizza. I don't want to have to try and explain an exercise. That seems very complicated. So I'd been someone kind of on and off doing sport for a long time. Not sport, sorry, gym, not sport. My brother loved, he was playing sport, Wimbledon's on, he's out playing tennis, football all through the year. Like he loves sport. And I was always not really interested, but I like going to the gym. But I quite often would give up after a period. I go for a few months and then just kind of get bored. And I think that's what keeps me going at CrossFit. But what actually led me to it, because as I said, I'd only kind of heard of it in a negative way. I'd seen the games, which again are like an incredible advert on one sense, because you're like, wow, look at this. And on the other side, you are like, well, yeah, people do get injured doing this. That's crazy what they're doing. But that's not what you're doing when you go and do CrossFit. That's quite right. It's kind of another extreme. But basically, I'm a romantic at heart, Armen. So for my wedding anniversary, I had told my wife before that because we'd had a baby, and before we got married, she used to cycle everywhere, because she didn't have a car. So she was kind of always very active. And then we got married and life just sort of gets in the way. Then we had a baby. So she was a little bit unhappy with kind of how she was feeling. She didn't feel very athletic. She didn't feel particularly strong. So I had said, like, okay, this year you pick something and I will pay for a year's like subscription to that. So, you know, what do you want to do? You want to do Zumba? You want to do some kind of cycle fit? You want to do a gymnastics? Like, you know, what do you want to do? You pick something and I'll pay for the first year as a gift. And that'll be like the anniversary gift. And we kind of looked in the city we lived in, like what's available. And we had a few different things. And we came across CrossFit Bath and we're like, well, you know, maybe. And so we sent them an email for the kind of drop-in session. She didn't want to go on her own. She was like, can you come with me just for this first session? I was like, well, yeah, okay. So it ended up that we actually booked in to do the drop-in on our anniversary. So that was the nice day out we did. Yeah, we met Ollie and, you know, he talked through why we were looking into this. And still at that time, the idea was, oh, this is just for my wife. Like, she's going to do this. But
little did you know.
Yeah. And then it was just kind of like looking at it financially, like, well, if we actually both get the membership, we save a little bit here. And if we do the intro class together, we can save a bit more here. Okay, we'll give it a go. Let's try. And yeah, it's like a year and a half later, we're both still doing it. It's the longest we've probably stuck with anything of this kind of thing. But we don't get to do it together very often because of our son. Mm-hmm. So maybe she'll go like in the morning to the ladies class and I usually go in the evening. I'm like at 7 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening kind of time. Occasionally we'll have a babysitter or somehow the planets align and we go together. And it is still to this day the weirdest thing to see my wife like clean and jerk or snatch a barbell or do anything like that. I'm just like, what? When did you start doing that? Like it's great, but
that's awesome.
It's just not what I remember her doing when I met her kind of thing. So it is good. Yeah.
That's a very cool way of stumbling into this whole thing.
Well, thank you very much. So, Armen, one thing that we like to do here is ask for questions from the dear listeners. They didn't know who I'd be speaking to, what we'd be speaking about. So if you ever want to send questions to the show, don't forget the hashtag questions without context. So we've got a few that I'd like to ask you. I think these are quite good for you, to be honest. They didn't know it was you coming on, but I think they're quite apt. So first of all, at Let's Get Contextual asks, what is the best ice cream?
Ooh, I am a bit of an ice cream connoisseur, if you would. If there's one thing that I eat constantly that really should not be consumed in the quantities that I am consuming it in, it is probably ice cream. And for a while, I would have said that my favorite ice cream and the best ice cream was Rocky Road. You know, it's a chocolate, marshmallow, almonds. It's just a really good combination. But I think now, after a year of almost consuming like a pint every 2 or 3 days, I think Ben & Jerry's Half-Baked might be the best ice cream ever.
That is a good
It just
option.
has so many good things going on in it. You know, but there's obviously, you know, sometimes you want a little bit of like a fruit thing. I like a good strawberry ice cream as well. You know, maybe some sorbet here and there. You know, a good gelato also goes a long way. But if I'm just going to go something that anyone anywhere can get, it's Ben & Jerry's Half-Baked.
Yeah, we're not allowed to keep that in the house anymore because I just go for it. Like that's I can eat pretty healthy. I can say no to nearly everything. But if there's ice cream, that's not going to last.
Here's how often I buy ice cream. I actually know for a fact that the Ben & Jerry's pint fits into my golf's cup holder perfectly. So I would literally buy enough of them that I would just slot them into the cup holders in my car on my way home from, you know, usually from the gym.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, you surely burnt enough calories. So
I hope so.
So he had a second question, which bear in mind, Katie might listen to this, and this could determine whether or not you do have children. How old should your kids be before they are given access to the internet?
Oh, that's a That's a really tough question to answer. Access to the internet. I get it's weird because I didn't have the internet until I was probably in my teens, like maybe 13. So I want to say something like that. But I know for a fact, like I have nieces and nephews who are single digits, like anywhere from 2 to 8 years old, and they all have access to the internet. So I think the answer is probably somewhere in between there. I think probably 6 or 7 is a good age where kids can start understanding what type of a tool the internet is, and that you can actually start having some more in-depth conversations about why certain things are off limits, and sort of what the boundaries are and what works and what doesn't. But that's a question that maybe a more professional, child psychologist would be able to answer.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll take your answer though. Who cares what he's got to say? At Yameld asks, breakfast. Would you go for toast, cornflakes, or scrambled eggs?
It depends on the day. I have a problem with cereal in that I cannot consume enough of it. And so that's one thing that we can't actually have in the house. Katie and I, neither of us have any self-control around cereal, so we don't keep any in the house. But if I'm on my own and just kind of making a quick breakfast for myself, I love a good scrambled egg. It's very easy. It's very quick. I can put as much cheese in there as I want. And it usually is a really good way to start the day for me. If I'm going with something savory, the scrambled egg is the way to go.
Okay, so here's a follow-up part to this question, which is burnt toast, soggy cornflakes, or manky hotel scrambled eggs made with powdered egg?
Oh, I'd rather have the soggy cornflakes. I would almost enjoy the soggy cornflakes, but there's something really off. I mean, like truly universally imbalanced off about powdered eggs. It's just one of the most gross and disgusting things on the planet that is just accepted by people who stay at hotels. People are just like, well, this is what they do at hotels. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I worked in a hotel in Venice, and we actually used real eggs to make scrambled eggs. So
that's fantastic.
That's the way it needs to be. And the thing is that shouldn't be a surprise. That should be the normal way. And right, you should just hear like occasionally, they use powdered eggs? Really? But it's not. So I don't know what that says about the world, but it's messed up.
That's very...
Okay, at Hangover Reviews asks, how far could you throw Jason? So I will tell you that I weigh 67 kilograms, which is, I've done the maths for you, 147 pounds.
How far could I throw you? That's a great question. And honestly would probably be a lot of fun to answer. Yeah. But I don't know. I think I could probably throw you pretty far, because not only do I do CrossFit, I do jiu-jitsu as well. And a big part of jiu-jitsu is some judo stand-up throws. So I definitely could move you. If I needed to, I could move you several feet.
Okay, so if you happen to be coming to the UK for any, I don't know, if there's going to be a sanctioned event in England or something, we'll get together, we can film it, and we'll put it up on your YouTube video. I am very technically going through like a bulking phase at the moment, because since the Open, and I realized, as light as I am and as great as that is for bodyweight movement, it's terrible for everything else. So I've been slowly putting on weight so that I'm putting on the right kind of weight.
Yeah.
So, you better get over here quickly, because it's going to get heavier.
Kilos is rough to be a CrossFitter. I mean, there's a lot of barbells in workouts that weigh around what you weigh. And I've got at least 20 kilos on you.
Yeah.
So it's, that's a bit of a difference there.
Well, I was listening to your conversation about being able to strict press body weight.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, it's not so hard, actually.
That's a good point. I guess the context really does matter there, right?
So okay. Well, I guess we'll put a pin in this one as to be determined in the future. All right. Final question from Phil, from the Phil Better Show. He asks, why did you choose to appear on this show? So
That's interesting. You literally just tweeted at me, and I understand the role that I play in the CrossFit space, but I also understand that like I'm not a big deal. Like I'm just a guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time and take advantage of those situations. And I really enjoy getting a chance to meet and talk to and, experience other media. So if that's being on other podcasts or talking to other people, interviewing about other things like that to me is almost like a way of keeping myself, like in the community, like grounded in the community. If I big leagued you and just said like, no, man, I don't want to be on your podcast, I've never heard of it before, I would never get anywhere. Right. That would be very against my personality. And so I think you hit me up, and I'm almost never going to say no to that sort of thing. And I felt like this could, at the worst, be kind of like a whatever conversation, and at best, I get to meet and experience a new thing that I hadn't before. And I think I'm closer to the best side of things than the worst side of things. This was a pretty fun conversation. It was a very, very good opportunity.
Oh, good. That's a relief. So I'm going to delete the rest of the conversation, and I'm just going to save that bit and just play it on a loop. Brilliant. Well, there were more questions, but I think that's enough for now. So thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate that. And as you said, it was literally a tweet that I sent out, and
yep.
And you said yes. So that was great. I had to quickly adjust my schedule because I very foolishly sent out a couple of tweets to people, assuming everyone would say no, and everybody said yes. So.
That's a good problem to have, Jace. I really do appreciate you reaching out, and I'm so glad that we were able to make this work. I'm looking forward to seeing what the future brings for you, because this is a very interesting concept for a podcast. I like your format here.
Thank you. So I'm going to try and drop this one into the group for the CrossFit box I go to, because not long ago I saw someone had posted your video when it was first the announcement about the changes of regionals, and they're like, hey, cool, look at this, and kind of panic faces. And I was like, I'll just slyly drop that in at the end, like, oh, do you remember that video you posted? Yeah, I actually had a chat with him. Here you go.
Very cool. That'd be awesome.
Get some background on this, because I don't know how many of them know you, or if it was just like look at this video that's appeared, because the YouTube channel is quite new.
Right.
Considering
it's only 3 months old.
You've been around for a long time in the space, but you've been working for other companies, doing things in a different way. So this is the first time that kind of it's associated with your name. And I guess that's the big difference, isn't it? Excellent. So where can people find you if they want to hear more about you?
At Armen Hammer TV. That's ARMEN Hammer TV on pretty much everything. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube is my platform of choice right now. That's where I'm trying to build my audience as big as possible. But that's also where I'm putting out most of my content. But yeah, YouTube and Instagram and Facebook are kind of the big three. I also have 3 podcasts. One is called the Wadcast Podcast. And the other 2 are both under Armen Hammer TV on iTunes and Google and wherever else you get your podcasts. So there's a whole lot of content coming out of me that people can consume if they want.
Yeah, it's amazing that you were able to make time for mine with 3 of your.
I'll tell you right now, this is one of 3 podcasts that I'm doing today. So
brilliant.
Yeah, there's a lot going on for me.
Yeah, and I was actually recording a podcast last night, which is my other show. So if anybody wants to hear that, you can head across to Getting to Know Who. There'll be links in the show notes for Armen's stuff, everything he's doing. There'll be links for that as well. If you want to contact me, you can do so through Instagram and Twitter at ACW Pod, or you can email a conversationwithpod@gmail.com. And one Instagram that I've never plugged on this show before is actually Jason CF. I'll link that, which is my CrossFit Instagram as well, because I'm a nice guy and I didn't want to bore all the people that know me with CrossFit posts. So I've got my own one, and then I made a separate one to be like, here's anything I've done with CrossFit. You can just look at it here. And so you kind of know what you get with that one.
That's very considerate of you.
Yeah, because as much as I love CrossFit, I don't always love CrossFitters.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
There's a lot of unfortunate stereotypes that go around, and a lot of them are true.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Okay, well, thank you once again, Armen, and for everyone listening, thank you as well. And we'll see you all next week for another episode of A Conversation With.